I've been an expedition leader now for about 7 years since leading the military, so in terms of all the sort of skills I needed to survive in the jungle, I had them, or I thought I had them at the beginning anyway. And then it was literally just a case of using the sort of skills and knowledge set that I had and then applying it to a different environment. I'd never been to the Amazon before. All my jungle experience had been from the Central America and the Far East in Borneo. But it was just literally a case of taking the skills that I had, maybe brushing up a bit on my medical training, and then planning this trip. In terms of how I've changed as a person since starting the expedition, I think I started as quite a cocky, slightly more immature person, and I really thought it was a case of me against the Amazon. And I think over time, a number of instances just humbled me and brought me down a peg or two. And I suppose my confidence was knocked initially, but then I suppose as you go through something really, really epic and really emotional, and when you have been sort of crushed down to quite a low level, as you build yourself up again, I think the difference was my confidence wasn't based on what other people thought of me, what people around me, because there were no people around me. I built up my confidence based on sort of literally your ability to cope with the situations, with the people, with the environment. In terms of the worst moment of my trip, it's very hard to specify. There was definitely a period in Peru where we were really struggling to get through a number of different man-made dangers, really. There was the drugs trafficking zone, there was in theory a sort of an area of terrorist activity, and there was also this very, very closed-off area of indigenous Indians. And there was no one specific day when I would say was my worst, but it was a pretty dark part of the expedition. I remember when I started writing the book about 2 months after I came back, I was looking back on the expedition already as being this, good fun adventure story. And then I started reading the journals that I'd written in my hammock every night, and they were miserable, utterly miserable. And some of them are written literally with tears streaming down my face. And it's, I think that period of the book and the expedition is pretty dark, but I've deliberately included it because I think it's quite a good insight into sort of the struggle that I went through when I was feeling quite isolated. And I think that isolation and at the time the inability to converse properly, my Spanish was appalling at the time, meant that I did sort of spiral into what I reckon from reading the journals back was pretty much depression, really. I considered giving up quite a lot, but I think always deep down in the pit of my stomach, I always knew that if you committed to doing something, and it was my dad who tried to sort of instill a few values in me. If you commit to doing something like play rugby on a Saturday and you go out on a Friday night and get horrendously drunk and you don't want to play on the Saturday morning, you've got to go and do it because you committed to it. And it was that sort of mentality. It was always deep down, we are going to get this thing finished no matter whether. I suppose it was just a case of sort of sacrificing current pleasure, current sort of enjoyment for that sort of long-term goal. So yeah, I never really considered giving up. I think the thing that I craved most while I was away was just, I think sport, that sort of camaraderie, being with your friends, interacting with people, banter, simple pleasures of life, not sort of nothing high level, not sort of literature or theatre or fancy food or anything, literally having mates around me and being able to bounce off them and I suppose just normality, really. They were the things that I missed. Best moment of my trip was the last day of the journey. Literally running down the beach into the Atlantic Ocean. Literally, I mean, Joe and I initially we could sort of hear the waves crashing of the Atlantic, and then we could smell the salt in the air. When you're by the seaside, you can smell the salt. And then we just rounded this corner, saw the waves in front of us, and immediately just shrugged off our rucksacks and legged it down the beach. It was an amazing day. Joe was my expedition partner that I walked with for the last 2 years of the expedition. He'd never seen the sea before at all, so he just had this big grin all over his face. It was an amazing day. I kept a blog for the whole expedition, and I was literally twittering, blogging, uploading photos, uploading videos, and that was deliberate in order to sort of build up this online following. And I thought, if you're going to do an expedition like this, we're suddenly in the lucky position to have technology to be able to literally find a fallen tree in the jungle, point the satellite unit up through this hole in the jungle canopy and communicate with the outside world. And I thought, that's an amazing opportunity, considering no one's ever done this expedition full stop, and to be able to broadcast that live. I was walking all the time. I suppose there was 45 kilograms in my rucksack. About 20 of that was made up of stuff that I needed to survive in the jungle, and about 25 kilograms of that was made up of HD video cameras, satellite internet links, MacBook, spare batteries, cables, chargers, spare tapes, cleaning kit, all of this different stuff in order to broadcast the whole expedition. And so we had this little unit called a BGAN, and all that is Broadband Global Access Network. It fixes up to a geostationary satellite, which sort of never moves, it stays in the same position as the Earth rotates. And so we always knew if we could find a fallen tree that we could communicate with the outside world. And I literally knew that Michael Jackson was dead within 2 minutes of him dying in the middle of the Amazon. And my sister emailed me actually to ask me if I was okay, but I was fine.